Some betrayals cut so deep that they ignite a storm of reckoning. When Isabella Moretti found her husband, Alessandro, tangled in the sheets with another woman, she didn't settle for whispered accusations behind closed doors. Instead, she did what he least expected. She captured the evidence, a series of damning photos that would bring his empire to its knees. Within hours, the walls of Moretti and Associates were covered in undeniable proof of his infidelity, leaving his colleagues, employees, and business partners reeling. But the destruction didn't stop there. Alessandro had spent years crafting a pristine reputation, but now his name was synonymous with scandal. Whispers of deceit and betrayal spread like wildfire, threatening to collapse the foundation of everything he had built. What started as a marriage and love and ambition was about to unravel in a spectacle of greed, heartbreak, and poetic justice. Isabella had once been a girl with simple dreams, a life filled with love, stability, and family. Raised in the quiet suburbs of Chicago, she never imagined she would fall for a man as powerful as Alessandro Moretti. He was the embodiment of success, an MBA graduate from Stanford, a financial prodigy who soared to the top of the corporate world. His charisma was legendary, but it was his devotion that won her heart. Their romance felt like a dream. Lavish weekend getaways to the Amalfi Coast, candlelit dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, and gifts that held both luxury and sentimentality. Alessandro knew how to make her feel like the most treasured woman in the world. The vintage bracelet he gave her on their first anniversary. The handwritten letters slipped between her books. The engagement ring he presented under the golden sunset of Santorini. When they married in a grand ceremony at a Tuscan vineyard, it was the kind of wedding people whispered about for years, a fairy tale brought to life. But behind the shimmering lights and overflowing champagne, cracks had already begun to form. Moretti and Associates flourished, and with success came distance. Alessandro became consumed by his work, closing deals in Tokyo, forging partnerships in Dubai, and immersing himself in endless board meetings. Isabella convinced herself that it was temporary, that once his empire was stable, he would return to her. She ignored the late-night calls, the empty side of the bed, the vague explanations about business trips that seemed to stretch longer and longer. But then, something changed. The warmth in his eyes when he looked at her had faded. He no longer kissed her forehead when he returned home. Their conversations became clipped, his patience wearing thin. And the worst part? The scent of unfamiliar perfume on his suit. The hushed phone calls in the middle of the night. The text messages he deleted before she could see them. A storm was brewing, and Isabella was about to uncover a betrayal far worse than she'd ever imagined. Instead of the warm greetings she once cherished, Alessandro barely acknowledged Isabella when he came home. A quick nod, a grunt, then he was on his phone, his attention lost in endless conversations. Some nights, Isabella would wake up to find him in the living room, his face illuminated by the glow of his screen, fingers typing furiously. Tension was carved into every line of his body, his jaw clenched as if holding back words he didn't want her to hear. She told herself it was just work. Moretti and Associates had expanded rapidly, and pressure came with success. But the small, unsettling signs continued to pile up. The faint scent of perfume, floral, delicate, clung to his suit jacket, something she never wore. The hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when she walked into the room. The messages that disappeared from his phone before she had the chance to see them. She wanted to trust him. Desperately, she reminded herself of their years together, the love they built, the vows they exchanged. But doubt gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. Whenever she tried to talk to him, his reaction was swift and sharp. "Not this again, Isabella," Alessandro snapped one evening, tossing his phone onto the couch. "I don't have time for your paranoia. I'm running a company, not playing house." His words cut her deeper than she expected. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a small nod, not wanting to provoke another argument. But in her heart she knew something had changed. Something, or someone, had come between them. The realization gripped her, unrelenting. She told herself she was overthinking, that stress was twisting her perspective. He was under pressure. He was trying to expand the firm. He loved her. He would never betray her. But lies, even the ones we tell ourselves, can only last so long. It was past midnight when Isabella heard the front door click shut. She had drifted into a light sleep on the couch, a book resting on her lap. The warmth of the penthouse did nothing to quell the chill that crept through her veins. Something was wrong. Slipping off the couch, she moved quietly across the polished marble floor. The dim foyer light cast Alessandro's figure in a muted glow, his back to her, fingers loosening his tie. She stood frozen, watching him. Her heart pounded. She wanted to run to him, to feel the security of his embrace, but an invisible wall now stood between them. Sensing her presence, he turned. Surprise flickered across his face before he forced a weary smile. "You're up late." "I was waiting for you," she murmured. "Long night. Had dinner with clients. It ran late," he replied, slipping off his jacket. His gaze darted away, avoiding hers. A scent drifted toward her, roses. Soft, unmistakable, not hers. "You smell like perfume," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Must have been from the restaurant, or maybe the hostess wore something strong. The lie was effortless, but so was her growing suspicion. The speed of his response made something inside Isabella snap to attention. She took a slow, measured breath, choosing her words carefully. "Alessandro, I'm worried about us." Her voice was barely a whisper, her eyes glistening under the dim light. "You've been distant, secretive. I want to believe it's just stress, but—" He let out a sharp sigh, rubbing his temples. "Not this again, Isabella," he muttered, frustration seeping into his voice. "I'm exhausted. I don't have the energy to entertain your insecurities every night." The way he said it, flat, dismissive, twisted something in her stomach. "Can we talk in the morning?" he added, already turning away. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Fine," she murmured, voice barely audible. She turned on her heel, walking back to the bedroom, but the moment she closed the door, the tears came, silent, burning. The weight of everything pressed against her chest, heavy like a stone. Later, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Alessandro slid into bed sometime after, his body a mere presence beside her. He didn't say a word. Within minutes, his breathing steadied into sleep while her mind raced through every lingering doubt. The dinner receipts for two. The cryptic text messages. The scent of roses that wasn't hers. Was it possible? Could the man who once vowed to love her be hiding secrets that would destroy them? A quiet resolve took shape in her heart. She wouldn't live in uncertainty. She needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable evidence that would either confirm her worst fears or put her paranoia to rest. Days passed, and her restlessness grew into action. She started small, sifting through credit card statements, glancing at call logs, checking the internal schedule of Moretti and Associates through the company intranet. But everything appeared normal. Alessandro was a legitimate businessman. There were restaurant charges, but meetings were part of his work. There were late-night calls, but they could have been to clients. Yet, a woman's intuition is rarely wrong. One morning, she found the evidence she wasn't even looking for. She was tidying the bedroom, attempting to maintain some sense of normalcy, when her foot nudged something beneath the dresser. Frowning, she crouched down and pulled it out. A scrap of delicate black fabric. Her breath hitched as she lifted it, her fingers trembling. A lace thong, satin, expensive, not hers. The room swayed for a moment, nausea coiled in her stomach. Alessandro had been brazen enough to bring another woman into their bed. Her grip on the fabric tightened as disbelief morphed into rage. She had spent months doubting herself, questioning her own instincts. But this was undeniable. She had her proof. And soon, Alessandro Moretti would have his reckoning. She stood frozen, the black lace slipping between her fingers like a cruel whisper of truth. A part of her wanted to storm into the living room, throw it in Alessandro's face and demand an explanation. But another part, the quieter, more calculating side, held her back. What if there was an explanation? A terrible misunderstanding? Her mind scrambled for alternatives, but the logic unraveled. How else would a stranger's lingerie end up beneath their dresser? Her grip tightened around the delicate fabric before she forced herself to take a deep breath. Without proof, real, undeniable proof, he could spin 1,000 excuses. She had seen it happen before. A friend once found an earring in her boyfriend's car. He swore it belonged to his sister. Another found a tube of lipstick in her husband's jacket. He claimed it was a gift for his cousin. Men like Alessandro always had a way out. That evening, She locked the thong away in a small jewelry box, as if caging the betrayal itself. But it was no longer a question of suspicion. It was a certainty waiting for confirmation. Was it guilt that made him restless? Not business stress, but the weight of deception? Every intimate moment they had shared in recent months flickered through her mind, tainted now by doubt. She thought of his distracted kisses, the nights he turned away from her in bed, the flicker of hesitation in his eyes when he said, "I love you." The ache of uncertainty was unbearable. She needed proof, something irrefutable. She considered hiring a private investigator, but the idea felt too distant, too impersonal. No, if Alessandro was betraying her, she wanted to see it with her own eyes. It was a terrifying thought, but also a necessary one. If she caught him, there would be no lies, no gaslighting, no smooth talking his way out. And if it was true, if he had truly shattered their marriage, he would regret every step that led him to this moment. The first step was learning his schedule. The next morning, Isabella visited Moretti and Associates, walking through the sleek glass doors with an easy smile. She found his assistant, Lucia, at her desk and leaned in conspiratorially. "I need your help," Isabella said sweetly. "I'm planning a surprise for Alessandro's birthday, but I want to make sure it doesn't interfere with any of his meetings." Lucia, flattered by the request, eagerly obliged. "He's flying to Madrid next week," she revealed. "But he'll be back late Friday night. He has an important meeting early Saturday morning." Isabella's pulse quickened. Alessandro hated Saturday meetings. He valued his weekends, preferring them for leisure or charity events. So why, suddenly, was he willing to sacrifice his cherished Saturday morning? She thought of the perfume, the late nights, the black lace hidden beneath their dresser. Her suspicions were no longer just suspicions. It was time to set the trap. If Alessandro was lying, this was her chance to catch him. The cover story was simple. She told him she was heading to Milan to visit her cousin for the weekend. He barely reacted, simply nodding as he kissed her cheek, his mind already elsewhere. She forced a smile, packed a small suitcase for show, and walked out the door. Once she was sure his flight had departed, she doubled back. With the help of a trusted friend, she checked into a boutique hotel near their penthouse under her maiden name. A discreet camera and an audio recording device lay in her bag, a grim testament to what she was about to do. Waiting was the hardest part. Panic and certainty waged war inside her. What if I'm wrong? The thought haunted her. Maybe exhaustion had changed him. Maybe stress was making him distant. But then she remembered the perfume, the late nights, the black lace she had hidden away, waiting for justice. No, she wasn't wrong. Friday night, just before midnight, she sat in a rented car parked across the street, eyes locked on the penthouse entrance. The city hummed around her, but she barely heard it. Every car that slowed made her stomach twist. Then she saw it. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. The doorman stepped forward, opening the door with polite efficiency. And there he was, Alessandro. Tall, confident, unmistakable under the glow of the streetlights. But he wasn't alone. A woman with dark, cascading hair stepped out beside him, elegantly dressed, graceful, familiar in a way that made Isabella's skin crawl. Alessandro placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the entrance with the same touch he once reserved for Isabella. Her pulse thundered. This was it. The moment her worst fears were no longer just suspicions, but cold, undeniable truth. She gripped the steering wheel, willing herself to breathe. Storming inside wouldn't accomplish anything. She needed proof, something Alessandro couldn't spin into another lie. She counted the minutes. 5, 10. Then she stepped out, adjusting the strap of her bag where the camera lay hidden. Her legs felt unsteady as she walked through the lobby, nodding politely to the security guard. The elevator doors slid open, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the top floor. Each second dragged. The soft hum of the elevator felt deafening. Her hands shook as she reached the penthouse door. Slipping a duplicate key into the lock, the one she had made weeks ago, she turned it slowly. A quiet click. She pushed the door open just enough to step inside. The living room was dark, but light spilled from beneath the bedroom door. Voices, a low murmur. Then laughter, soft, intimate, unmistakable. Her grip tightened around the camera. Alessandro Moretti had made the worst mistake of his life. She turned the handle slowly, easing the door open just enough to slip inside. The living room was dark, but a faint glow seeped from beneath the master bedroom door. Her stomach clenched. That room, their room, had once been sacred, a space filled with whispered dreams and shared laughter. And now, someone else was inside it. Her bare feet moved soundlessly across the hardwood floor, but every step felt unbearably loud in her own head. The hallway stretched endlessly before her. The closer she got, the heavier the weight in her chest became. Then she heard it. A soft, feminine laugh. A hushed voice. The rustling of sheets. Every sound was a blade, cutting through her illusions, severing the last threads of doubt. She reached the door. It was slightly ajar, left open just enough for a cruel glimpse inside. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she raised the camera. Alessandro was there, shirtless, leaning over a woman with dark hair cascading over their pillows. Their lips were locked, bodies tangled in a mess of sheets. Clothes lay discarded on the floor, proof of just how deep their betrayal ran. If she had held on to any foolish hope, it shattered in that instant. Her hands trembled as she clicked the camera shutter. Once, twice, again. The soft mechanical sound was drowned out by their hushed murmurs, their complete obliviousness to the woman standing just outside. Tears burned her eyes, but fury drowned the pain. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was undeniable proof. She shifted slightly, angling the lens for a clearer shot. Alessandro's face came into focus. There would be no escaping this, no twisting the truth. Then the woman moved. Isabella froze. For a moment she thought she'd been seen. The woman glanced toward the door, her eyes flickering in the dim light, but just as quickly she turned away, whispering something against Alessandro's skin. Isabella exhaled silently. She had to get out, now. Stepping backward, she carefully avoided the floorboards, each movement controlled. Then, a creak beneath her foot. She held her breath. Inside, Alessandro murmured something, and the woman giggled. No one moved toward the door. No one suspected a thing. Another wave of fury rushed through her. She turned, slipping back through the living room. The moment she reached the foyer, she shut the door without a sound and hurried down the corridor, heart hammering. By the time she reached the elevator, her vision blurred with tears, not just from heartbreak, but from the searing fire of revenge igniting within her. As the doors closed behind her, she already knew what she had to do. This would not stay a secret. She wouldn't confront him in private. Oh no. Alessandro Moretti had made his choice. Now she would make hers. She would strike where it hurt him the most. His empire, his legacy, the very foundation he had built with ruthless ambition. Let Alessandro try to explain away the photos when they were plastered across the walls of Moretti and Associates. Let him feel the crushing weight of public disgrace. If he thought he could betray her and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn the true price of deception. Back in her hotel room, Isabella transferred the images onto her laptop, her hands trembling with a volatile mix of rage and heartbreak. Each photo was damning. Alessandro's face was unmistakable, his body entwined with another woman's under the soft glow of the bedroom lights. A woman Isabella now recognized, Giulia Romano, a senior consultant within his firm. She had heard the name before. Whispers of Giulia's talent, her sharp negotiation skills. Office gossip hinted that she knew how to sway deals in her favor, not just with strategy, but with charm. Now it seemed she had used those same skills on the CEO himself. Isabella's mind raced. If she confronted him with these photos, he might try to silence her with money or whispered apologies behind closed doors. He might beg for forgiveness, swear it was a mistake, promise it would never happen again. But she didn't want apologies. She didn't want secrecy. She wanted him humiliated the way he had humiliated her. Anonymously emailing the photos to the board of directors would be too impersonal. Leaking them to the press lacked satisfaction. No, she needed something immediate, something inescapable. A bold idea formed. She would print the images and post them all over Moretti and Associates. In the boardroom, the break room, the hallways where employees gathered. She would pin them to his office door, where no amount of hush money or PR spin could bury the truth. The scandal would explode within minutes. Alessandro had already disrespected their marriage. Why should she worry about the consequences for him? Yet, as she prepared to send the files to a print shop, hesitation crept in. Was she lowering herself to his level? Would this act of revenge cost her own dignity? She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were rimmed red, her lips pressed into a firm line. No, she was past the point of no return. Alessandro's betrayal hadn't been a fleeting mistake. It had been calculated, deliberate, a violation of everything they had built. If he thought he could wield power so carelessly and break her without consequence, he was about to learn just how destructive the wrath of a betrayed woman could be. By dawn, she had finalized everything. She paid extra to ensure the prince would be ready that same morning. It was time to watch his world burn. Using a pseudonym, she placed the print order. By the time the city stirred awake, the photos were ready. Under the soft glow of dawn, Isabella sipped a quick coffee, the bitter taste grounding her as she finalized her plan. She knew Moretti and Associates inside out, their security routines, the best times to slip in unnoticed, and which areas would deliver the most impact. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with an icy determination. The pain of Alessandro's betrayal still burned, but now it fueled her purpose. He had destroyed her trust. Now she would destroy the illusion of his perfect world. The firm occupied 3 pristine floors of a high-rise in Milan's financial district. A sleek glass entrance welcomed visitors with its minimalist elegance, a testament to Alessandro's carefully curated image of power. Usually, Isabella entered as the CEO's elegant wife, attending charity events and corporate gatherings where people greeted her with admiration. Today, she would be a shadow. She timed her arrival perfectly, 6:30 a.m., well before the morning rush. A black baseball cap concealed her hair, her fitted jeans and plain sweater a far cry from her usual refined style. The bleary-eyed security guard barely lifted his gaze as she strode past. Her ID badge, one Alessandro had given her long ago, still worked on the scanners. He had never thought to revoke it. Fitting. On the 25th floor, the nerve center of the company, she began. The first set of photos went up outside the executive boardroom. Large, glossy prints displayed in a ruthless row. Alessandro's face, Giulia's body wrapped around him. Their betrayal immortalized under the cold glare of office lighting. A sick mix of adrenaline and sorrow twisted inside her, but she kept moving. Down the hallway leading to executive offices, she placed more photos. In the break room, she stuck them to the fridge, pinned them on the bulletin board, even slid a few under coffee cups, waiting to be discovered. On the 24th floor, where dozens of mid-level employees worked in cubicles, she repeated the process. She taped photos to the elevator doors, tacked them onto notice boards, scattered them in conference rooms. Every placement felt like a strike, a precise cut meant to wound. She worked fast, moving silently, her eyes scanning for early arrivals. Each passing second sent her pulse racing. She envisioned the reactions, the gasps, the whispered gossip spreading like wildfire, the scandal unraveling in real time. After nearly 30 minutes of orchestrated destruction, she reached her final stop. Alessandro's personal office. Here, she reserved the largest, most explicit prints. With a steady hand, she pressed them against his glass wall, ensuring they were visible from the hallway. Her message was clear. This wasn't just revenge, it was a reckoning. She stepped back, surveying her final act of destruction. The largest, most damning photos were plastered across Alessandro's office wall. 2 smaller prints rested on his pristine desk, and another was pinned to his plush leather chair. As a final touch, she slid a note beneath one. No more secrets, Alessandro. Her work was done. With her pulse hammering, Isabella slipped into the hallway, moving swiftly toward the elevators. As the doors closed behind her, a wave of conflicting emotions crashed over her. Vindication, fear, exhilaration. There would be consequences, not just for him, but for herself. Yet in that moment, nothing mattered more than exposing the truth. Stepping onto the street, she inhaled the crisp morning air. Dawn was breaking, the city waking up to a normal day. But within the next hour, normalcy would shatter inside Moretti and Associates. Her phone buzzed. Naomi. Isabella ignored it. She wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the first wave of employees flooded through the doors, their coffee cups in hand, expecting an uneventful morning. The first gasp rang out near the executive boardroom, then another in the break room. Within minutes, shock rippled through the company like wildfire. Some froze in horror. Others whispered in frantic disbelief. A few fumbled for their phones, capturing the scandal unfolding around them. By the time senior managers scrambled to rip the photos down, it was already too late. Employees had forwarded them to colleagues, uploaded them to private group chats, and fueled the rumor mill at an unstoppable pace. The CEO of Moretti and Associates, a man once revered for his business acumen, was now the subject of hushed conversations and barely concealed smirks. And then there was Julia Romano. Her name spread like an open secret. Those who once admired her sharp negotiation skills now viewed her with contempt, their eyes flicking toward her empty desk. Would she even dare to show up? At exactly 8:45 a.m., Alessandro arrived, expecting nothing more than a routine Thursday. He stepped off the elevator and immediately sensed something was off. The usual morning chatter had dissolved into a tense hush. Employees parted as he walked through the corridor, avoiding eye contact. A cold lump formed in his stomach. He strode toward his office, his jaw tightening. The moment he stepped inside, he froze. Photos, everywhere. His face, Julia's unmistakable silhouette, their bodies entangled in the damning glow of bedroom light. A wave of nausea rolled through him. He grabbed a handful of pictures, his fingers curling into fists. His vision blurred, but not from disbelief. He knew this was real. What he didn't know was who had done it. Then, his gaze landed on the note. No more secrets, Alessandro. The room felt suffocating. Outside his office, whispers turned into silence. Everyone was watching. A wave of nausea surged through Alessandro as his eyes darted from one incriminating photo to the next. Each image was more damning than the last. Shock melted into rage. Snatching a handful of photos from his desk, he stormed into the hallway, his voice echoing off the walls. "Get rid of these! Now!" Employees who had been frozen in stunned silence suddenly scrambled into action. Managers rushed to tear down the images, their hands shaking. Some barked orders to delete any digital copies, but it was futile. The damage had already been done. By noon, half of Milan's financial district was buzzing with the scandal. Moretti and Associates' legal department was swamped with calls, while the PR team scrambled to craft a response. But there was no controlling this. The photos had already spread. On social media, the fallout was catastrophic. Industry professionals whispered about the firm's crumbling credibility. Investors exchanged wary glances. Hashtags hinting at corporate adultery trended, dragging Alessandro's once untouchable name through the mud. In a private corner of the city, Isabella watched it unfold. She had done exactly what she set out to do: expose his betrayal, shatter his carefully curated image. And yet, as her phone buzzed with updates from discreet sources inside the company, she felt something unexpected. Not relief, not satisfaction, but the slow, creeping realization that this was only the beginning. By early afternoon, the board of directors demanded an emergency meeting. These weren't just executives. They were industry titans, the kind of men and women who had placed their faith, and more importantly, their money, in Alessandro's hands. Now, that trust was gone. They gathered in the grand boardroom, a space lined with glass windows that overlooked the Milan skyline. The air was thick with tension as Alessandro stepped inside, his usual confidence noticeably absent. Dark circles rimmed his eyes from the chaos of the morning. He adjusted his suit, trying to keep his composure, but the weight of their stares pressed down on him like a crushing force. Many of the photos had been removed from the office walls, but not before they were scanned, shared, and dissected by the public. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Vittorio Ferrante, didn't bother with pleasantries. "We've invested substantial capital in you, Alessandro," he said, his voice cold and precise. "Your leadership, your image, and now, because of your indiscretions, we find ourselves at the center of a PR disaster." Alessandro swallowed hard. "This is a personal matter," he said, forcing calm into his tone. "It doesn't affect the company's operations." Vittorio's eyes narrowed. "Tell that to the clients who are threatening to withdraw their contracts," he said sharply. "This isn't just a scandal, it's a financial liability." Silence fell over the room. For the first time in his career, Alessandro Moretti was no longer in control. Alessandro swallowed hard, scanning the grim faces around the table. There was no way to spin this. He took a steady breath. "I won't deny my lapse in judgment," he admitted, his voice controlled but tense. "But these photos were leaked with malicious intent. This is an attack on my personal life, not my ability to run this company." A woman at the table, Claudia Marchetti arched a brow. Our clients don't see it that way, she said coldly. Neither do our investors. Trust is our most valuable asset, and right now, it's in freefall. Vittorio Ferrante, the chairman, leaned forward, folding his hands on the polished table. We've already lost a major account this morning, he said. They cited ethical concerns. Others are threatening to follow. How do you plan to stop this bleeding, Alessandro? His jaw clenched. We can control the damage, he argued. I'll issue a public apology, step back from certain external roles if needed. But I built Moretti and Associates from nothing. No one understands our operations like I do. Vittorio exchanged a look with Claudia. The board is considering a temporary suspension of your CEO duties, he said, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into any misconduct. Alessandro stiffened. You're talking about removing me, even though I'm still the majority shareholder? A younger board member slid a document across the table. Take a look at the clause on moral turpitude, he said. Alessandro's fingers curled against the pages as he read. The language was clear. The negative publicity alone was enough to justify his removal if the board deemed it a threat to the company's stability. The walls were closing in. For the first time in his career, Alessandro felt powerless. His mind raced with desperate options. He could blame Julia, claim the photos were doctored, accuse a rival of sabotage, but deep down he knew the truth. And he knew exactly who had done this, Isabella. He had underestimated her. And now the board was on the verge of gutting him from the empire he had built. He pushed the document away. I can fix this, he said firmly. Give me 48 hours. Let me stabilize the situation, reassure our investors, and prove that I can manage this crisis. A long silence filled the room. Some board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly preferring his immediate removal. Vittorio sighed. 48 hours, he said finally, scanning the table for objections. If by Friday this storm hasn't settled, the board will exercise its right to remove you. Alessandro forced himself to nod. He had 2 days to save everything. But as he sat there, pulse pounding, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just fighting for his career. He was fighting against Isabella Moretti. And she had just drawn first blood. Alessandro rose from his chair, bowing his head slightly before exiting the boardroom under a cloud of disapproval. Outside, the office buzzed with hushed whispers and stolen glances. Employees who once greeted him with respect now eyed him like a spectacle. He gripped his phone, praying for a miracle, something, anything, to stop this downward spiral. But deep down, he knew. If Isabella was behind this, she was the only one who could stop it. The real question was, after everything, would she? Across the city, Isabella sat in a quiet corner of Parco Sempione, her phone buzzing non-stop with messages from friends, acquaintances, even people she barely knew. Did you see the photos? Is that really Alessandro? What on earth happened? She scrolled past them, alternating between exhaustion and cold satisfaction. The scandal had erupted far beyond Moretti and Associates. It was now a wildfire spreading through every elite circle they had ever moved in. She ignored most of the calls, unwilling to face the curiosity or pity. Then her screen flashed with a name she had been avoiding all morning. Alessandro. For a moment, she considered letting it ring, letting him suffer in the silence, the way she had suffered in his betrayals. But against her better judgment, she answered. Isabella, he said, his voice taut with urgency. Where are you? We need to talk. A swirl of emotions rose in her chest. Anger, resentment, the ghost of something softer. Parco Sempione, she replied, her tone clipped. By the fountain. 20 minutes later he approached. His usual effortless confidence had been replaced by something rigid, forced. His hair was slightly disheveled, his jacket wrinkled, clear signs that the situation was unraveling him. She stood her ground as he stopped a few feet away, tension thick between them. Around them, people moved through their lunch breaks, pigeons darted after crumbs. No one realized they were witnessing the final collapse of a once powerful couple. Alessandro broke the silence first. I know it was you, he said, his voice low, raw. You planned this. You posted those photos. Isabella met his gaze without flinching. You gave me every reason. His jaw tightened. You wanted revenge. Fine, but do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about us. People's jobs are at risk. The board is ready to remove me. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Oh, so now you care about consequences? Her eyes burned with restrained fury. "Did you think about anyone else while you were sneaking around with Julia? Did you think about me?" He winced, shame flickering across his features. "I won't deny I messed up," he admitted. "But the way you exposed it," she cut him off, her voice unwavering. "You humiliated me, Alessandro. You made me question my worth, my sanity, for months." Her breath hitched, but she stood tall. "I won't apologize for revealing the truth." Alessandro dropped his gaze, as if searching for the right words. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "I'm sorry for what I did," he whispered, sincerity threading through his tone. "I never meant to hurt you, Isabella. It was a stupid, selfish mistake, but we can't let this destroy us." He took a step closer. "Let me fix this. However I can. I'll sign anything, give you whatever you want. Money, property." His voice tightened. "Just recant this, Isabella. If this scandal keeps spreading, it'll be unstoppable." For the first time since it all unraveled, she saw something in him that looked like fear. But then she thought of Julia in their bed. Her bed. The memory reignited her fury, steeling her against the small part of her that still wanted to believe him. "I didn't do this for money, Alessandro," she said, her voice like ice. "I did it because you shattered something sacred. And maybe you shouldn't be CEO if you can't even keep your personal life in check." His face paled. Fear twisted into anger. "So that's it? You want to see me ruined?" Tears burned at the edges of her vision, but she refused to let them fall. "No," she murmured. "I wanted you to realize what you threw away. But maybe we're past that now." She turned away before he could see her break, walking swiftly toward the exit. But before she disappeared into the crowd, she glanced over her shoulder. "If your empire crumbles, don't blame me for exposing the truth. Blame yourself for living a lie." She didn't look back. Her heart ached, but she told herself it was the price of justice. Sometimes heartbreak demanded a reckoning before healing could begin, even if that reckoning burned everything to the ground. As the board's 48-hour deadline loomed, Alessandro scrambled to contain the fallout. Meetings blurred together. PR consultants, crisis managers, legal advisors, carefully worded apologies were drafted, watered-down statements pushed out. It wasn't enough. The media devoured the scandal, dubbing it the Moretti debacle. Investors wavered, stock prices dipped, the board's patience wore thin. Meanwhile, Julia Romano disappeared from the office. Whispers spread that she had taken an indefinite leave, perhaps to escape the humiliation of facing coworkers who had seen far more of her than they ever should have. But Alessandro barely had time to think about her. Every second was spent trying to save the company he had built from the ground up. Late Friday afternoon, with only hours before the board's final decision, his phone rang. The caller was unexpected. Lorenzo De Luca, a rival in the finance world known for orchestrating hostile takeovers. "I hear you need a lifeline," Lorenzo said smoothly. Alessandro gripped the phone tighter. "I can keep your investors from pulling out," Lorenzo continued. "But it won't be free. I want a seat at the table, partial ownership. And then, the final blow. Eventually, a path to full control. Merging the two firms, it was a devil's bargain. If he accepted Lorenzo's terms, he might salvage what remained of Moretti and Associates, but at the cost of ceding control. If he refused, the board would strip him of power, leaving him as nothing more than a bystander in a company that still bore his name. Alessandro clenched his jaw. Pride told him to fight. But pride wouldn't pay the bills. It wouldn't stop investors from fleeing or keep the vultures from circling. He arranged a private meeting that night at a rooftop bar overlooking Milan. Lorenzo arrived first, exuding quiet triumph. Like a man who already knew he'd won, he swirled a glass of scotch, watching Alessandro approach. "I'll release a statement in your favor first thing Monday," Lorenzo offered smoothly. "I'll assure key investors that the scandal is a personal matter, nothing that will impact profitability." Alessandro exhaled sharply. "And in return," Lorenzo smiled, "you sign over a 30% stake to me. Within a year, you step down as CEO in favor of a joint leadership model. We rebrand as Moretti De Luca Group." Alessandro's stomach churned at the thought of his name merged with his rivals. He had spent years keeping Lorenzo at bay. Now he was inviting him inside his empire. Still, if Isabella refused to help contain the scandal, this was his only way out. 25%, Alessandro countered, gripping his glass tighter. Lorenzo smirked. Fortune favors the bold, he mused. You're not in a position to negotiate. The words stung because they were true. Alessandro's signature on the preliminary contract felt like signing away a piece of his soul. He hesitated for only a second before scrawling his name. All the corporate spin in the world wouldn't erase the humiliating reason for this deal. Lorenzo extended his hand, his grip firm, almost crushing. As Alessandro walked away, a cold dread settled in his chest. He had saved the company, for now. But at what cost? Lorenzo was inside the gates, and who knew what else he would demand once he gained a foothold in Moretti and Associates. Returning to his penthouse, Alessandro poured himself a drink, staring at the bed where the infamous photos had been taken. Isabella's vantage point. Rage simmered beneath his skin. He blamed Julia for tempting him. He blamed Isabella for exposing him. He blamed the board for their lack of loyalty. But deep in the corners of his mind, a whisper of truth remained. No matter how many people he blamed, he was the one who had lit the match. Monday dawned with an uneasy calm. True to his word, Lorenzo De Luca publicly endorsed Moretti and Associates, praising the firm's resilience and expressing confidence in Alessandro's leadership. It worked, at least temporarily. Share prices, which had been in freefall, began to stabilize. Investors, wary but hopeful, hesitated on pulling out. The board, ever attuned to financial signals, saw a lifeline in Lorenzo's backing. While they refrained from ousting Alessandro immediately, they placed him under strict scrutiny, restricting his autonomy. The official statement was carefully crafted. The CEO's personal matters were being addressed, and the company's core operations remained strong. But inside the firm, the damage was done. Morale was fragile. HR circulated memos warning employees against discussing or sharing explicit content, threatening termination for violations. It didn't matter. Everyone had already seen the images. Everyone had questions about the company's future, under a leader whose reputation was now inseparable from scandal. And of course, everyone whispered about Isabella. She had vanished from public view, refusing interviews and ignoring the relentless curiosity of acquaintances. The initial satisfaction she had felt from exposing Alessandro had dulled, replaced by an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. She spent a few nights at Naomi's apartment, turning over the same questions in her mind. What came next? Divorce? A long legal battle? Or was there still a sliver of something left to salvage? One morning, she found herself paging through old photographs. Her wedding day, their trip to Italy where he had proposed, family gatherings filled with laughter. Each image felt like a relic from a life that no longer existed. She realized she still loved the man Alessandro used to be, but that man was gone. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A message from Alessandro. Can we talk? She stared at the words, her emotions twisting. Against her better judgment, she agreed. A coffee shop. Neutral ground. They met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Milan. The tension between them was thick, the air heavy with everything unspoken. Alessandro, once so self-assured, looked drained, his usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. Isabella sat across from him, her gaze steady, waiting for him to speak. "Thank you for coming," he said finally, his fingers twitching against his cup. "I know we're beyond apologies, but I needed to see you, to talk about what happens next." She exhaled slowly. "You mean legally? Are you offering a settlement, or do you want me to disappear quietly?" He flinched. "Isabella, I don't want you to vanish," he murmured. "I deserve your anger, but I don't want to lose everything, including you." His voice trembled, raw with something she couldn't quite place. "I made mistakes, big ones, but if there's any way to handle this..." She cut him off, her expression unreadable. "I'm listening." "Maybe we don't have to end this in a bitter, drawn-out war." Alessandro's voice was quiet, measured, but Isabella didn't miss the tension beneath his words. She studied him, her gaze sharp. "Is this about love, or are you just trying to salvage your public image?" Her voice didn't waver. "Because I won't be your pawn in some PR scheme." His shoulders sagged, the weight of her words hitting their mark. "It's not just PR." He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I still love you, Isabella. Our life together, it wasn't a lie, even if I ruined it." His voice softened. "If divorce is inevitable, I want it to be amicable. But if there's even the smallest chance we can fix this, I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Her heart clenched. A part of her wanted to believe him, to believe that the man she had once loved still existed beneath the betrayal. But another part, the part that remembered every humiliation, every lie, kept her grounded. "I don't know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Too much has happened. Too fast." Alessandro swallowed hard, his expression unreadable. "I can give you time." They parted with no resolution, only a fragile truce. But as Isabella walked away, she realized that even time might not be enough to heal what had been broken, not just by his betrayal, but by her own act of vengeance. In the weeks that followed, the scandal slowly settled into uneasy silence. Moretti and associates stabilized under Lorenzo's looming presence. Whispers spread that Giulia had quietly resigned, possibly in exchange for a settlement to avoid further legal entanglements. The media moved on, chasing fresher scandals. And yet, while the outside world moved forward, Isabella remained stuck in limbo. She packed her things and left the penthouse, settling into a modest apartment across town. It was nothing like the luxury she had grown accustomed to, but it was hers, a place to start over. She started therapy, unraveling the tangled emotions of betrayal, anger, and regret. The satisfaction of revenge had long since faded, leaving her with only questions. Had she gone too far? Maybe. But a part of her still believed Alessandro needed that wake-up call. The separation papers sat on her kitchen table, waiting. Every day she picked them up, reading the clauses about asset division, spousal support, and even custody if they ever had children. Each time she set them back down. A war raged inside her. One part of her longing for the finality of divorce, the other clinging to the faint memory of the life they had once built. One late afternoon, she found herself drawn to an old passion. A literacy program she had once championed at a community library in Milan. She stepped inside, the scent of old books filling the air, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimpse of something she thought she had lost. Herself. The memory stirred something deep inside her. For all the pain, Isabella couldn't deny that once she and Alessandro had shared something real. Something built not just on luxury and power, but on a desire to create something meaningful together. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon. But there he was, standing quietly at the back of the community library, watching as she read to a group of wide-eyed children. He made no grand gestures, didn't interrupt. He just stood there, listening. When the story ended, the children tugged at her sleeve, asking if she'd be back next week. She smiled, reassuring them she would. Then, with measured steps, she walked toward Alessandro. They moved into the hallway, the sound of playful laughter fading behind them. "I wanted to see what you love," he said softly. "You always talked about this program, how much it meant to you. I never made the time to be part of it before." She folded her arms across her chest, a subconscious shield. "Why now?" He exhaled, his gaze steady. "Because I'm trying to understand you, beyond the penthouse, beyond the company, beyond everything I took for granted. I want to know if I can still fit into your world, without drowning it in mine." For the first time in weeks, something in her softened. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was something. She studied him carefully, looking for traces of the man she once loved, wondering if he was truly changing or simply desperate to reclaim what he had lost. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice thick with unspoken emotions. "Then don't," he said quietly. "Just know that I'm trying." He offered the smallest of smiles before turning to leave. She watched him go, her mind tangled in uncertainty. The wounds of betrayal were still fresh, the damage still raw. Maybe time would bring closure. Maybe it would bring something more. For the first time since that morning of scandalous photos and corporate upheaval, she allowed the smallest, most fragile seed of hope to take root. Whether it would bloom or be crushed by reality, only time would tell. Once more, thank you for following the turbulent journey of Isabella and Alessandro, a couple torn apart by betrayal, yet bound by a past they can't fully erase. From the shocking images that shattered a company to the frantic boardroom battles and emotional reckonings, their story is a reminder that every action has a consequence. Betrayal demands a price, and sometimes karma collects its debt with brutal precision. But even in the wreckage of trust, the faintest possibilities of redemption can emerge. If this story resonated with you, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that actions have lasting impacts. And subscribe to our channel for more stories of love, heartbreak, revenge, and redemption. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more gripping tales that explore the raw complexities of human relationships and the power of self-discovery in times of crisis. Thank you for watching.